The start of the new Formula 1 season may be just over 1 week away now, but in the meantime there's something else to keep us very, very excited, and that is Drive to Survive on Netflix. And I think we're all really excited to see it. It's the perfect timing. We've got testing this week, Drive to Survive coming out, then we go into the first race weekend. Plenty to get excited about. Obviously the diehard F1 fans, they have questions and they want to know what is in season 4 and just how close is it to actually what we saw on track right the way through last season. Now season 4 of Drive to Survive is another 10 episodes, and we've managed to get a sneak preview of the first 8, so it's the final 2 that we haven't yet seen. But it's definitely given us enough of an idea of what to expect and what is going to be coming your way. So we thought we would give you a rundown of the good, the bad, and the Yuki of Drive to Survive Season 4. If that doesn't work, then get rid of it, but I made myself laugh. One of the big drawbacks I think that Season 4 has is there's no Max Verstappen. So Max last year explained that he didn't want to do any more interviews with Drive to Survive. He said that he thought they faked some of the rivalries. I think back to last season, Season 3 with Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz Jr., that kind of rivalry between them. It did seem a little bit overhyped compared to how it actually was. So Max said he wasn't going to do any more Drive to Survive interviews. And what that means is that a lot of his side of the story and Red Bull's side of the story is told by Christian Horner, their team boss. Now, Horner is right the way through this series, and he really does, I think, embrace the villain role almost. He's constantly throwing these jibes and barbs towards Mercedes, towards Toto Wolff in particular. And I think particularly through the sort of first few episodes, when there is this focus on Red Bull and Mercedes, you do kind of get an idea for the duality between Horner and Wolff. They've got two very different styles. Horner is always saying, look, we're the underdogs, Mercedes have everything to lose. But it does definitely miss the Max factor. It definitely misses having the other side of that championship fight being told. Lewis Hamilton, he does feature in the series a bit. He I thought, actually was some of his most vulnerable that we've seen him ever in Drive to Survive. And there's a really good episode when it covers Max's run of wins through the summer and then culminates at the British Grand Prix where they had that huge crash. And Lewis, at one point, he really opens up to Toto Wolff about Baku, and he sort of says how disappointed he was in what happened. And I just thought that was really interesting. We've not really seen that kind of vulnerability from Lewis before on Drive to Survive. And again, I think that kind of personality-driven narrative, that is what's really important. So I thought it was good to get that side with Lewis, and it just would have been good to get it with Max as well. So it was a bit of a shame that we didn't really get that. Now, it's not only all about Red Bull and Mercedes who are fighting for that championship. A number of the other teams do get their own episodes and a lot of coverage. We see McLaren, they get 2 episodes that really focus on what's going on there. Daniel Ricciardo obviously has been such a big figure right the way through Drive to Survive. His struggles with the team, I think, are highlighted really well in the second episode of the series. And then later in the season, the redemption arc is completed when we have Monza, which obviously, again, is Ricciardo sort of in full form, and his personality really, really does come to the fore. But the only issue with that episode is we don't really get a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. There's not really another layer to everything. It's kind of like just, this is what happened through the race. And I think I would just like to see a little bit more behind the scenes in terms of, how was Daniel sort of like dealing with all the struggles he faced earlier in the year. But it's that kind of thing that I think Netflix, if they could do a bit more of, if they could maybe try and get the drivers to maybe be a bit more vulnerable in places, and particularly talking about the hard moments, I think that would have been really successful. But they're still good episodes. The stories are still really good, and I think it's really cool to see, the full personality of Daniel Ricciardo on good form once again. Now, one of the biggest personalities comes from one of the smallest members of the grid, and that is Yuki Tsunoda, who is a rookie. Obviously, this is his first time in Drive to Survive. He's just on such good form. He delivers some amazing one-liners. I'm going to let you wait to see them for yourself, because honestly, it is so funny. Yuki sort of struggles with life and living in Milton Keynes, which he calls the most boring place in the world, Yuki's words. And it really does, I think, sum up the struggles he faced. And we know that AlphaTauri, Red Bull, they were growing frustrated with his constant crashes and ended up moving him over to Italy after a while. And that's covered really, really well, I think. But again, the issue is that we don't really get enough time to fully explore the full story there. So the Yuki Tsunoda episode is shared with Esteban Ocon, and it's about sort of drivers who go through ups and downs in F1 and how they deal with them. Now, they're 2 very different drivers at 2 very different stages of their careers. One of them is a Grand Prix winner now, and we do see a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff from Hungary in that episode. But yeah, you do, I think you just wanted a bit more. Like, it just seemed like a very odd pairing between the 2 of them. I think both of them could probably have had their own episode had there been enough footage, but it's still good to get these personalities coming through. And yeah, I think Yuki probably is one of the big winners from this season of Drive to Survive. Now, one of the other big characters who has really soared in popularity thanks to Drive to Survive is Guenther Steiner. And Guenther is right the way through this season. The Haas episode, I think, is probably one of the most interesting watches of season 4. Steiner, I think he's very open about the challenges the team faces. We know how tough last year was for them. But there's a big focus on Nikita Mazepin and his father Dmitry and their involvement in the team and the Uralkali backing that obviously has now since been terminated in the light of current events with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There's a really tense moment when we know through last season Mazepin was unsure about his car. He said the chassis was too heavy or broken and that there were issues compared to what Mick Schumacher was facing. And he really struggled to get up to speed. And there's a moment where Dmitry Mazepin says that I'm going to pull the funding. He threatens to take that funding away from Haas. And it's kind of made out to be as though that would completely ruin the team. With Nikita's early struggles, they complete Mazepin's redemption arc at his home race, the Russian Grand Prix. But it's a bit of a strange setup because he's sort of made out as making this really good tyre call towards the end of the race. But he finished last, and you hear over the radio, they say, oh, you beat Schumacher and Latifi. Schumacher and Latifi didn't finish the race. So it's things like that where it's like, if you're a casual fan, you won't be aware of that. But if you're a real diehard fan who can remember exactly what happened through all of the seasons and everything like that, you're like, well, that's not really a big like, oh, well done you finished ahead of 2 drivers who didn't finish. Now, one of the bigger redemption arcs we saw in F1 last year was with Williams. After so many years of struggles, they finally got those big breakthroughs with not only a double points finish in Hungary, but George Russell's podium, in inverted commas, at the Belgian Grand Prix. And luckily, they do get a lot of good airtime. The Netflix was with Williams through the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, so we do get to see all of the emotions that the team went through. And you really, really see how much it meant to the whole Williams team. And we get introduced to Jos Capito, who again is one of these great characters, I think, who really shines in season 4. I think him, Yuki Tsunoda, Guenther Steiner, yeah, they are really coming to the fore. And then later in the season, it's all about George Russell and his move to Mercedes. I thought it was just a very interesting narrative that they told through that, but the timings sometimes do jump around a bit. For example, Imola, when Russell was looking good for points until the crash with Bottas, that's not mentioned really in the Williams episode where it's talking about their hunt for points and the near misses that the team had. But then you go forward in the season and it talks about Russell's move to Mercedes, and then you're back at Imola, and then you jump from Imola to Silverstone and Silverstone to Spa. It just doesn't quite feel very cohesive. And again, if you're a casual F1 fan, you might not quite understand when races were, but if you know the season like the back of your hand, you'll think, well, why have we just gone from the middle of the year after the summer break then right back to the second round of the season? The story ultimately is told very well, but even then you don't quite get the full picture. If you're a real diehard follower of F1, you'll realise that things don't quite entirely add up to how they were. But I think it's also important to remember that the target market for Drive to Survive is not those diehard fans. It's not the fans who are every single week watching Grand Prix. That ideally is what they want to turn the Netflix fans into. And that doesn't mean the diehard fans can't enjoy Drive to Survive. And absolutely, I mean, you'll love it. You will. It's essential viewing, even if there's these little things here and there that you realise don't quite entirely add up with how they were in reality. There's also a lot that you don't see. We don't see Fernando Alonso, as I mentioned, he's barely in it. Sebastian Vettel, he's in it a couple of times doing an interview, but he never really properly features. And his Aston Martin team, that for me is probably the biggest and most surprising omission, because Vettel and Aston Martin, that was obviously such a big storyline in season 3. Even with Checo, Sergio Perez, that move to Red Bull was such a big story towards the end of season 3. And in the first 8 episodes, it doesn't really get much of a mention. Now, I must put a big disclaimer over all of this and say it is only the first 8 episodes. We don't know how the season finishes because we've not seen those 2 yet. But of course we do know. We had this discussion around Abu Dhabi of where do we draw the line in terms of entertainment versus sport? Was this an example of it being pushed too far one way? But I think that has also made it very open to being something that can be criticised quite easily. It was that after Abu Dhabi, fans said, well, that was made for Netflix. Like, it was purely like a Drive to Survive led thing. And I don't think that's entirely true. I think that it is going to be really interesting, though, to see how they handled it and how accurate it is. I think when it comes to Abu Dhabi, I think they really do need to stick entirely to as it happened, I think. But overall, Drive to Survive Season 4, it's unmissable. It's, again, beautifully shot. It's a really compelling watch. It really focuses on the personalities. I think it's something that, in terms of your overall F1 viewing, this is all part of that. And it kind of buys into just the content that you can get to follow Formula 1 at the moment. I think that, yeah, some fans will want a bit more depth in places, but overall, it's a really, really good watch.